Well, this weekend, you can check out a play in Davidson about a little known but a pivotal moment in Charlotte's history. A Small and Humble Erasure is playing at the Armour Street Theater. It details the early days of Charlotte's art scene and the effort to build what is now Theater Charlotte on top of a slave cemetery.
Yeah, we do want to point out that Theater Charlotte fully acknowledges they sit on top of this slave cemetery. Joining us to talk about its playwright Stephanie Gardner. Good morning, Stephanie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great, thanks. How are y'all?
Doing well. So tell us more about this play that people can come check out.
Well, it's called A Small and Humble Erasure, and it's actually a play on words because Small is actually a human, John H. Small, who was a city leader in Charlotte in the 1930s and 40s. And then Thomas Humble is the Humble, and he was the director of the Little Theater, which was already a really popular theater at the time, but they were just floating around and performing in all kinds of different spaces, as many theater people can understand today. Churches and schools and basements. And so the play that I wrote is a play within a play about this group going and finally finding what they believed was their perfect space for their theater. And then the consequences of that and the implications of that with regard to the Cherry community, which resides, right next door, or at the time was right there.
Yeah, so interesting. And this piece of history is very few people know about. How did you learn about it, and what's been the reaction from the public so far?
Yeah, I moved to the Cherry community about 6 years ago, and over time have gotten involved in some of their preservation efforts. And I've had the opportunity and really the honor of having relationships with a lot of the elders in the community who are just rich with so many stories of Cherry's history, some of whom can point out every single parcel of land and tell you who lived there and what it was. So in becoming involved with them, one of the elders said to me a couple of years ago, our graveyard is right there where the Little Theater is. And so they're still calling it the Little Theater, and they're referring to this graveyard. And so I just kind of logged that away in my head. And then a couple of years later, somebody came to me from the Cherry community and said, can you help us find the founders of our church community, and handed me an oral history. And this one line in the oral history really stood out to me. It said, John Small deconsecrated our graveyard and built the Little Theater on top of the remains. And I felt like it was screaming out to me theatrically, but also to find out the story behind it. So initially I was just researching the story, how it happened. Can we find these graves? Were they moved? And going around and visiting various graveyards in town. And then over time, these characters who are, some of Charlotte's illustrious and founding families just started taking up residence in my head. And at that point, I asked the Cherry leaders, would you mind if I explored this theatrically, as I am a member of the theater community and I write and act and love plays.
Interesting. And so you're tackling a serious subject, but there's a bit of humor kind of weaved into it. And a ghost?
There may be, I'm not going to give that away, but there may be one or more ancestors who make appearances. Yes. And I think the humor sort of had to come in because as you're researching something that is such a serious subject as this, and then as I was particularly looking through document after document, including city council records and the minutes where they made the resolution with all the whereases, where they were deconsecrating the cemetery, that was very hard to read, and I had to face it and look at it. And so in order to remove myself and remove the audience from that harshness a little bit, I think where I went was sort of over the top humor, because in fact, this is a moment in time. We're not in that moment in time right now, but I think we can all appreciate that this happened. And so that's where the humor comes in. Also, there's a meta-theatrical element in that this is a play within a play. So these are community theater actors who are also acting out this story. And so that gives us a little distance as well, and a chance to see the actors commenting on the roles that they're playing. And why was I cast in this role? And who is this guy? And so there's a lot of ability there to get the facts of the story out, but to also get the humanity and the humor.
And is that something you want to do after people see this? What do you really want them to take away from this? Is the facts of what happened, or what?
Both things. I mean, I think it's an experience in and of itself. So I think people who know nothing about this and who know nothing about Charlotte can appreciate the story because it's just a really gripping story. But I also do. I think the motivating force for me in writing it was just how did this happen, and in a greater sense, how do erasures happen, because we continuously do erasures, one community over another, and it's a big part of American history and world history. And so I think it's important to look zoom in on how these types of erasures happen and see that they don't come shouting out at us. They don't say, oh, hi, I'm an evil person over here. It's a much more subtle event, and so, yeah, I sort of want people to get curious about that, and in hopes that we, don't repeat history.
It is important to know your history. Stephanie, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time this morning. Again, a clear and humble erasure playing this weekend.
A small and humble erasure.
A small and humble erasure. Thank you so very much for that at the Armour Theater in Davidson.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Absolutely.